Okay, like Bettina said, I've been doing this for a while. For returners, raise your hands. Okay, great. Yeah, so many of you. So this is totally new, right? Just started from scratch, decided to do something entirely different. So we'll see how this goes. For those of you new people, well, it's new to you, right? So I've been a student for a long time now. I was a teacher for 11 years. I was a middle school teacher in the mountains of North Carolina. Then I came to UNC Chapel Hill. You from the mountains of North Carolina? You're from Boone?
Yeah.
Where'd you go to school?
I'm going to Chapel Hill. I went to high school.
You went to high school there. Where'd you go to middle school?
Hardin Park.
I did my student teaching at Hardin Park School in 4th grade. Yes. Okay, just right there. All right. Anyway, so I've been working with teachers ever since about 2007. Okay. So I have 3 days. I'll be here today until about 11 o'clock, and then tomorrow I'll come back in the afternoon, and then I'll be with you on Thursday again. Okay. And today is I would consider foundational. Like we're just gonna lay out some of the basics of what you need to know and think about. And it's not like it's a touch and go and we never think about it again. It should be things you're thinking about the entire summer. Tomorrow we're going to focus on specific teaching strategies that you can use on a day-to-day basis. I'm up to 19 in my list right now. You think I like lists? And then on Thursday we're going to discuss some of the work by Doug Lamov in his book Teach Like a Champion. There are some specific techniques. We're going to have some videos that we're going to watch, and we're going to demonstrate some together on Thursday. All right, so today is a little more on the we're sitting in class kind of side of things, and then the next 2 days is a little more interactive. Although today is entirely possible that we're going to have a lot of conversations and discussions along the way, so it's not just me. Any questions? Okay. All right. So, bless you. I have a couple things I want to pass out. We'll talk about the purpose of these tomorrow, but just keep them in mind. You take one and you pass it around. You take one and pass it around. Take one and pass it around. Take one and pass it around. All right. Hope you have a writing utensil. All right. We are going to start with a do now, also called a warm-up, or a bell ringer, or a firecracker. It's all the same concept, right? Did any of you have time in middle school or high school where a teacher started with a little 5 to 8 minute warm-up session? All right, that's what this is. Let's see if this works. There we go. So here's your warm-up 2 questions. What do you know about teaching, and what does teaching involve? Give you about 2 minutes or so. Okay, something we'll talk more explicitly about tomorrow is when your students should have a turn and talk partner or partners. So if you could kindly find 1 or 2 people you could have as your turn and talk partner and discuss for a minute what you wrote down. Okay? I've seen some of the writing. I've heard some of the conversations. There's some brilliance here I would like to get out. I really like some of the honesty here. So I'm looking at your name's Evan. I just met Evan. And the first thing he wrote down, if it's okay that I share this, because I heard it elsewhere, is not enough. Right? What do you know about teaching? I don't know enough about teaching. I even heard Alex Lowe over here says that I know some, but not enough. Right? So even someone who's been teaching for a long time feels like there's so much more for me to grasp. Something else that you feel like you know about teaching. Yes?
I studied a career. You've done it in school, outside of school, but you can be taught by inanimate objects.
You can be taught by inanimate objects. So the who can change, the source can change, the location can change. Interesting, I like that direction. Someone else, what do you know about teaching? What else do we want to get on the table here? If I had a whiteboard, I'd be writing this down. Yes?
There are different ways of teaching, with each one having a different focus or philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely, right? We could talk about that for a few minutes. There are different ways of teaching, and the way that you teach has a philosophy behind it, right? There's a reason we teach the way that we teach. That's good. It's going to get us ready for this morning. Something else about what you know about teaching. Yes?
I said that it requires a racial and economic lens.
A racial and economic lens. So teaching requires a racial and economic lens. I would say there's a few more lenses we could put, but those are good for now, and it's certainly relevant to the work that we do here, right? And I would say if there is no racial or economic lens, or someone says there isn't one, I would say that in and of itself is a racial and economic lens. Do you follow? It is always present, whether you want to admit it is there or not. So you're ignoring or pretending race and class don't exist in the teaching phenomena. You are advantaging some students and disadvantaging others by default. Does that make sense? Everyone follow that? All right. Something else we know about teaching. I like where you took us there. That was good.
I said it's a practice that's always evolving, not a routine that you memorize.
Ooh, I hope you all heard that. It's always evolving, right? It's not a routine that you memorize. We will certainly talk about the importance of structure and routines. Those are key. But teaching, the interactions are always evolving, right? One of my favorite examples of evolution is when I watch LeBron James play basketball. For a long time, he's been one of the best in the world at what he does, and yet he still gets better. His game evolves, right? I talk to my own children about this. Here is someone who could say he is the best at what he does, and yet he's not satisfied. He wants to get better, and he continues to practice in order to get better. I think the same is true about teaching, right? No matter how long we've been doing it, there's always an evolution, there's always room to grow, there's always something to learn. Good. At least two more. These are really good. I like the direction y'all are taking me here. Yes?
Teaching doesn't only happen in a classroom.
Right. It doesn't just happen in the classroom. It can happen in different spaces. I remember a couple years ago, we had a teacher. I want to say this as politely as possible. This teacher's greatest contributions were probably in the hallways, at lunch. Dynamic, effective, super engaging. Kids wanted to be around this teacher. Inside the classroom was more of a struggle. But the impact on kids' lives outside of the classroom could not be measured, right? So yes, where we teach will change. For some of us, it might be before school, during meet and greet. It might happen during lunch. It might happen in between classes. Teaching can happen in all those places. It's good. Okay?
I said that teaching the labor of love, that is both undervalued and incredibly important.
I like that phrase, labor of love. That's a theme that's going to come up in a moment on my slides, right? We do it because we're passionate about it. We do it because there's a deep sense of care and concern about other humans, about our community, right? About making the world a better place. And it's undervalued. Absolutely. I could get on my soapbox about that, but we'll stop for now. I agree with you. Yes?
I was just going to say that understanding that valuable teacher students, your students have to teach you well as well.
Really like that too. While we're setting ourselves up to teach our students, there's a high likelihood our students are going to teach us. Those of you who are returners are the ones probably nodding your heads right now. You realize that you're not the only one who's going to be doing the teaching this summer, that students are going to be teaching you. You're going to learn some valuable lessons about yourself, about life, about your community, about values, right? And so much more. I saw another hand go up. I want to make sure I get everyone who wanted to contribute. One more? Come on, give me one more. Yes, let's see.
I was going to say, what does teaching involve? Structure and intentional preparation.
Absolutely. Structure and intentional preparation. I think sometimes when I look at a basketball player like LeBron James, it just looks like he was born to do what he does, right? Well, look at his physique. Look how tall he is. You know, it's probably easy for him to play so well. What I don't see, well, Instagram gives me a little peek into what he does when he's not playing on the court, is the training that goes into it. What happens behind closed doors, right? The intense preparation, mentally and physically. Same for teaching, right? Some teachers make it look easy. And it's like, I had this college professor would just walk in and start talking, and that's all teaching is. You walk in and you start talking, and you don't realize the hours and the years of preparation to get to the point to be able to do that. Right? It's almost an insult to the profession if you think it's easy, right? Because it takes so much time and preparation. And I think I heard Alex say too that it's very complex. right? The deeper you get into teaching, the more complex it becomes. There are so many moving parts. You probably saw on your agenda that this session was called Rocket Science. That's what I framed it as last year, because the idea was we tend to think that rocket science is really hard, and I read an article in which the author argued that actually teaching is harder than rocket science, right? Rocket science actually has known physical properties, right? Physics, the laws of physics that we can count on, that we can measure. Teaching, no. We like to think we can measure a lot of it, but we can't, right? So it's very dynamic, it's always changing, it's really challenging and complex. Anyone want to add anything else before we move on? Teaching, what is involved?
I said teaching involves a lot of research, intentionality, and collaboration.
Absolutely. Research, right? People study this. We know what best practices are. It involves, what was the second thing you said?
Intentionality.
Intentionality. Everything is done with purpose. We've thought through it before. We have a reason why we do it. And the third thing?
Collaboration.
Collaboration. As April said this morning, we don't want to be lone rangers. We don't want to do this all on our own. We're best when we're thinking together, even if we disagree. When we talk it out and explain our reasoning, that's important collaboration. Something else about what it involves? Yes?
The ability to recognize failure.
The ability to recognize failure. Absolutely. Will you fail some this summer? Get ready. You will fail this summer. It will happen. Anyone shed tears last year? Come on. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, thank you. I know more of you did than raised your hands. Anyone feel frustrated last year? Anyone get tired last year? Absolutely, right? We have to be ready to reflect on the parts that aren't going so well so we can make changes so they can become better. So being a reflective practitioner is key. Anything else about what it involves? Can I get two more?
Having lots of options and
What-
responding to people.
What do you mean by having lots of options?
Like having lots of, not only making one plan.
Not only you're foreshadowing one of my points. It's very good. You need to have more than one plan, right? More than one option. Your toolbox needs to have a variety of tools. Absolutely. Anything else?
An environment that's suitable, so like into the space where teaching can accurately people feel comfortable and open to learn.
Absolutely. Again, you're foreshadowing a point that I have, so bonus points for you, right? There needs to be an environment in which students feel safe, where they can take academic risks, where the work that we need to be done can be done, right? And that starts with the restorative mindset that April talked about yesterday, right? That's our starting point. I'm going to talk about that again in a moment. Any more? Yes?
So doing life together, by that I just mean that like when I was going through school I learned a lot more from who my teachers were and how they conducted themselves than after the lessons.
Right, so there's like the lessons, there's the content, and there's some of these other principles, meaning that we derive from our experiences engaging with other human beings, right? So if we have good teachers in our lives, they're good role models, there are other lessons we're going to pick up along the way. It's really important. All right, if you would please make sure your name is on this, and would you all on this side pass it to your right, and on this side pass it to your left until they're right here in the middle for me, and then we're going to pass them forward so I can then correct them. Okay, very good. That was a good warm-up. A good do know. As you're past this, are there any spoken word fans in the room? Anyone like spoken word poetry? A couple of you? All right, good. So I have one here that we're going to watch and we're going to talk about. It's called 10 Things You Should Know About Being Asian in the South. It is by a Durhamite. His name is G. Yamazawa. And he has risen pretty high in the spoken word community. He has performed internationally. He came back to Durham a little while ago and did a performance at Jordan High School where I heard him do this one live. It's one of my favorites that he has. All right, are we ready to watch? I trust that our volume is working. If not, Luke's going to be on. In fact, I don't even know how to click on this. Thank you. We might have an advertisement.
10 things you should know about being an Asian from the South. 1. After growing up with teriyaki chicken and fried chicken on the same dinner table for 20 years, what is your favorite food will become a very difficult question to answer. 2. When you smile, They'll try to ridicule your eyes for being smaller than usual. Remind yourself it's only because America has a tendency of wanting to see through you. 3, when you forget where you're from, you will truly become American. 4, when they speak of blacks and whites, do not take sides. A wolf will become friends with a sheep as long as its kindness leads to something it can dig its teeth into. 5, they'll try to call you all kinds of things like Bruce Lee, Jet Li, Jackie Chan, Christy Yamaguchi, and Hong Kong Phooey. Laugh along with their ignorance. It'll give you strength. Remind yourself that when you were a little boy, even being deemed as powerful of a man as Bruce Lee still made you feel weak and helpless. 6, I never really liked list poems like this, but I figured it'd be fitting since Asians are supposed to be good with numbers. 7, don't get mad at innocent ignorance because some shit is just plain funny. See, one day a classmate asked me what I was, and when I told her I was Japanese, she said, "Oh, I thought you was Asian." 8, when they call you Chinese, correct them. 9, upon correcting them, tell them your full name in your native dialect. Remind them of your parents' birthplace. Remind them of Hiroshima and Nagasaki until the conversation feels nuclear. Remind them of your ancestors who danced with swords until their choreography was lethal. Then remind yourself that you are only reminding yourself, because after your entire conversation, you will still be Chinese to them. 10, find time to search inside. You see, a smile won't shine unless you wear it with pride. See, I remember every time I would laugh, I would cover my eyes, but now I realize I have nothing to hide. See, I like my chicken teriyaki or fried. I like my fried rice with hot sauce on the side. This for all those ridicules and racists as a child, and this is dedicated to all them Asians from the South, but there were plenty of things that I had to sacrifice too. I used to sell half-pounds to half of my school, but I ain't swagger jacking. I won't rap like you, cause dog, I'm Asian. I eat cats like you.
Okay, I want to hear from just a couple of you about something that spoke to you from listening to G in the spoken word poem. An insight maybe you had, or maybe that someone you were talking to had. Can we just get a few? Even if you haven't talked yet, that'd be great time to speak up.
We were agreeing on, I think it was the 9th point, as far as at the end of the conversation, you're really just reminding yourself of like your heritage and where you come from. And I was saying that the reason why it's so important, I guess the emphasis when you're really talking to yourself is because as long as you still have that firm belief in where you come from and the values that you hold true for yourself as far as your community or your family, then no one can really shake that from you, and their words will, eventually just
Absolutely. Right. It's hard to communicate, or expect others who really are only preoccupied with where you're from so they can categorize you. Let me say that again. And other people really only want to know where you're from so they can categorize you. So they can put you in a box. And you tell them enough to say, no, I don't fit in your box. I'm this. Doesn't resonate. I like that point too. Something else, James? Did you want to say something?
That absolutely, actually. I guess I'll just add to it. It is. I guess it is. Sometimes it is difficult having to encourage and remind yourself, because honestly, when you're encouraging, somebody else encouraging somebody else, all the time. You have to do that for yourself. I feel like we probably have to do that. That's what teaching sometimes. School is not nice, but that's just something that I feel resonates with me. It's like I can't encourage myself. That's something I'm capable of.
Absolutely right. So what I hear you saying is sometimes it is up to us, that there's not a community around us building us up and reminding us of the importance of our stories and where we're from and who we are. In fact, there's the opposite messages in a lot of communities, right, where we're kind of being torn down and stereotyped and judged in ways that aren't productive for ourselves. That work is sometimes left to us. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah.
We talked about both of those things and also about his line and being right to American. I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of our students here are facing that struggle, and I think it's we try to have a space and do the same to let them do that and embrace their.
Yeah. Right? The United States is a complicated place, right? there's a lot going on. And his line about in America, like, it's when you don't remember where you're from, that's when you truly belong. And there's some truth to that, right? And the education, the history of education, right? The history of schooling is about this idea of assimilation, right? It's about forgetting where you're from so you can fully, fit into something that's new and different. But it's not new and different. It's new and different to some people. It's normal to a large majority of the people who founded the country, right? But we don't want to get into the sociology and the history of public education, but just know there's that undercurrent. But now in our current moment, and in education research in social justice communities, we've seen schooling as a means of, supporting students' heritage and who they are and where they're from, because we know it has value. Right? Anything else before we move on? Yeah.
In the box when he was saying that being very diverse and feel so small. Being put in that box is really limiting.
Right, do y'all get his references, right? When someone looks of Asian descent, and there are some American icons who are of Asian descent, like a Bruce Lee, or a Jet Li, or a Jackie Chan, right? People that we see in movies and know. And for him to grow up to be perceived as someone as powerful as them could be reduced to feeling weak when someone's calling them that name, right? Right, there's so much more we could unpack, but it's time to move on. All right, so, if anyone has, I encourage you all to take notes. If you have things to write with, please do. There's going to be a lot of information that comes. I do have 2 breaks built in, right? So we're not just going to go full steam until 11 o'clock. So there's 2 breaks built in, and there's going to be some conversation where you turn and talk. There is in our Google folder for day 2 of orientation, there's a 30 slides, 30 things, ... notes. If some of you like to take notes, if you like to type on a computer or whatnot, or if you want to do it after the fact, I'd like for us to keep track of them in a shared document so we can revisit them, because there's going to be a lot we're going to go through today, all right? We've covered a lot already just in warming up, all right? So can I see any head nods of anyone who has access to technology who might be willing to take notes or share? I see at least one. Can I get maybe a second or third to share the responsibility if needed? Okay, thank you. I think I got at least 3.
Coco, Sonia, and Justin. All right, I'm sharing the file right now.
Okay. So, in honor of G, 10 things you need to know about being Asian in the South, we're going to do 30 things you need to know about teaching at Student U. Okay? You ready? Any questions? I promise each point is not 30 minutes. All right? All right, number 1, teaching is hard. Some of you got at this when we were writing in the do now, right? Teaching is hard. I don't want anyone to walk away thinking that teaching is easy, that you've seen it done before. Your mom or your grandma was a teacher. In fact, if your mom or grandma was a teacher, you probably know how hard it really is, right? Like, we don't want to be under the misperception that you just walk in and things happen. That is not the case. Even the best teachers that I know are thoughtful and intentional, and they practice, and they have routines. And even if you don't see structures, there are structures that might not have been visible to you. Okay? Teaching is hard. That's point number 1. Returning teachers, do you agree with this? Teaching is hard. Anyone surprised last year at how hard it was, or the year before? Anyone? Can someone corroborate this for me? Yes, I see some hands up. Harder than you thought. So be ready for that. That's point number 1. Point number 2, saviors are not needed. And have you seen Freedom Riders? Yeah. Or Stand and Deliver, old school movie, Lean on Me, Dangerous Minds. There are television shows that feature teachers that do miraculous work. And while certainly I think there are many teachers who do amazing work, and we should honor what they do, there's a narrative that comes out of those films. Usually white teacher, black and brown students. It's the white teacher's values and knowledge that saves the black and the brown kids. We want to disrupt that a little bit, right? Because the implicit message there is that the kids are in deficit, that they are in need of being saved. And I want to point out to you right now that it is not our students that have the deficit, it is the system that is the deficit, right? That is an entire 180-degree shift, right? We are not blaming our students for the situation that they are in, right? That is cruel to do so. So if you look at any of our students and think somehow, some way, they are responsible for whatever hardships they're facing, whatever struggles they have, whatever challenges they're trying to overcome, that is the wrong mindset to have. Okay? There are systems that have failed them. And we are here because we're trying to correct those systems. Fair enough? We in agreement here? Right? We need not saviors. We need hard workers who are willing to get down and do the nitty-gritty work of being in the classroom to teach academic skills so our students can be set up for success. Okay? I have a quote here from Chris Emden. He's a teacher educator at Columbia University in New York City. There's a wonderful book called For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood and the Rest of Y'all Too. I have a link to an article that he wrote later in this. By the way, this is all in the Google Drive folder if you'd like to access this later. I took this from an interview that he had a couple years ago. To be a good teacher, the effective skill you need is not ego. It is humility. I know you're excited to teach. I know you're excited to make a difference in the lives of young people, and you will. But that is not our primary motivation. It is not the self-fulfilling reinforcement of privilege that we're after. It is the humility to go in and partner and work with others in our community. Number 3, everyone teaches literacy. This is not just for you English teachers. Where are my English teachers? All right? We're going to rely on you. You have expertise. You probably love books and stories and poems, and this might be a little easier for you. Who's teaching Read Fearlessly? Every hand goes up. You're teaching literacy, right? There's a specific time of day where you're going to be getting into a novel and enjoying reading with your students. You're teaching literacy. Where are my Global Connect teachers? All right, you're teaching literacy every day. So much of the social studies field is really about reading comprehension and memorization, right? So much access happens through reading, text analysis, annotations, right? Where are my science teachers? You're teaching literacy, right? Yeah, we're teaching concepts. Sometimes how do we access those concepts? Through reading. And how do we learn about those concepts? Through writing, right? Reading and writing happens in a science class. And I saved the best for last. Where are my math teachers? You are literacy teachers, right? And yes, you work with numbers. We call it numeracy. But you also work with reading and writing, right? I mean, word problems. Right? In fact, I heard a 4th grade teacher the other day when I was in a school lament. I think over half of that end of grade exam was word problems, multi-step word problems. And what was her concern? The reading ability of her students to get to the math through the words. If you don't do literacy in math class, you're setting students up for failure. Right? That does not mean do word problems all day long every day. But do some. Right? Everyone teaches literacy. Any questions about this? Everyone teaches literacy. Every day. All right, number 4. Content is secondary to skills. And what that means is the specific science content you're covering, whether it's astronomy or some physics or biology, honestly, I don't really care. Are there skills that students are going to learn as they work through the content? That's what I'm most concerned about. Math. Whether you're doing decimals or fractions or geometry or, pre-calculus, doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter the specific math content you're covering. I want them to learn some problem-solving skills. I want them to understand math in a different way. I want them to grab the concepts that are going to help them no matter what kind of math is in front of them. Okay? Same with Global Connect. Same with English. To me, it doesn't matter what short stories you're reading. Are there some that are better than others? Probably. Right? Not that content doesn't matter. Content does matter, but we're going to focus on skills, skill development, reading skills, writing skills, critical thinking skills, communication skills, the skills that we need to be successful in life. Does that make sense? So be careful, don't get caught too much in the content, right? Because skills are most important. Number 5, kids do well if they can. This is a line from a book by Ross Green. The book is called Lost at School. Ross Green is a psychologist. He's Harvard trained. And he noticed in working with children with challenging behavior that they were set up for failure constantly at school. So he set out to figure out why that is. And he realized there was this assumption that most teachers and administrators have about kids who exhibit challenging behavior. Pause for a second. Have you ever known someone who has exhibited challenging behavior at school before? Yeah. Someone's even confessing here on the front row. Yeah, that's me. And there's more of us too, right? So we know what challenging behavior can look like. What he says, and this is an estimate, about 80% of children don't exhibit challenging behavior, but there's 20% where it's different, right? Challenging behavior. He says the baseline assumption for most teachers and administrators is that it's a motivation problem. Which, if that were the case, his phrase would be, kids do well if they want to, right? And so the default reason is kid exhibits challenging behavior, well, he's just lazy or unmotivated or has these other issues, doesn't see far enough into the future, doesn't want to take care of himself, right? Or this, that, or the other. Ross Greene says, no. Anywhere he's ever gone, when people have an opportunity to succeed, they do it. When they don't succeed, when they exhibit a different kind of behavior, it's because there's a skill gap or some stressors that can't be overcome. And so the role of teachers then is not as motivators. I got to convince you that doing this math is better for you. I got to convince you that this is the right thing for you to do. I'm trying to work through and motivate you. You know, the difference is I need to find out what skills or stresses are in your life, and I need to mediate them. I need to teach you those skills. He opens his book with the story of a kid named Joey. Joey's in class. Joey struggles a little bit with academics. Teacher gives some directions, multi-step, complicated. Joey doesn't know what's going on. So when teacher says it's time to begin, does Joey know what to do? No. Joey's like, what? Now Joey's trying to figure this out. It's just hard. It's complex. It's not working for him. And then he doesn't get started right away. What does the teacher do? Joey, why are you not working? I said get to work. I just explained the directions. What is Joey's response? What the hell? It feels like someone's poking a finger in his chest, calling him out in front of all of his friends. What feelings go through him? He's embarrassed. He's ashamed. He doesn't know what to do, right? So when the teacher says, Joey, get up here right now. He's being reprimanded because he's confused. How often does that happen in school? And so what does he choose to do? He runs out. He runs out of the classroom. Teacher's like, oh, well, got to call the principal now. Joey's run out of the room. We got to call his mom in. Let's see about giving him suspension. Is that a motivation problem? No. It's a skill problem. He didn't have the skills to understand what was going on. It added some stress to him that he couldn't quite handle. He didn't have the coping skills that he needed to deal with that intense moment in the classroom. So the whole purpose of Ross Greene's book, Lost at School, is we need to shift how we think about student misbehavior. Right? That this connects directly to the restorative mindset that April talked about yesterday. Right? And I think Luke gave an example of a student who went out and punched a locker. And what April said, if you were paying attention yesterday, was punching the locker is a symptom of something else that's going on. And we need to figure out what that something else is. Can we talk about how punching a locker is not productive? Sure. But is that going to solve the core problem? No. We solve the core problem, there's no punching a locker, there's no running out of a room. Does that make sense? So we have to get at the root of what's going on with our students. Skills and stressors. Is that clear? I want to pause. This is huge. I almost jumped up in the middle of April's presentation yesterday. Y'all were being very good note takers. You were listening really well. She was explaining everything very clearly. I wanted to jump up and say, do you realize how transformational this is? A restorative mindset is entirely different from typical schooling. Does that make sense? And here's one of the troubles with this kind of particular mindset. For most of you, traditional school worked just fine, didn't it? Getting your name on the board, oh my God, I hope my mom doesn't find out. Or teacher says, I'm going to call your mom or your grandma or your dad. You're like, oh, well, a detention after school, death, right? And so you think those measures work for all kids. They do work for some, right? For some, we can do those little exchanges, little consequences, a little bit of, discomfort and frustration to remind students that that's inappropriate behavior. But for some students, our most challenging, those don't work. They don't work at all. And I was thinking as April was talking yesterday how transformative this is. There are certain contexts in which punitive consequences are common, and there are other contexts in which conversation and problem solving and conflict resolution are common. And the big one that comes to mind for punitive consequences are prisons and schools. You don't do something right, you're out. You're done. Schools have their own version of solitary confinement. You could lay one on top of the other. Our prisons and our schools are so similar. And we wonder why some kids drop out or are pushed out or don't succeed. Again, it's not the students that have the deficit, it's the system that is the deficit. Right? In other contexts, if you're not teaching well, are we going to give you consequences like solitary confinement? I'm sorry, you didn't do a good lesson today. In-school suspension for you. Am I bribing you with candy? No, I'm not doing these little extrinsic motivators with you because you're adults. In the professional world, we do not give punitive consequences. We problem solve. We resolve our conflicts through conversation. That's what we're asking you to do with our students, because we want to prepare them for the professional world they're going to enter in a few years. Does that make sense? To do otherwise is prepare them for a system that looks like prison. You hearing me? Do you notice I care about this? I have seen too many kids get set up for failure. I have sat in classrooms and watched kids get set up for failure. Because teachers have power trips. Because kids think logically all the time. I'm here to tell you they don't. If you do that again, I'm going to send you out in the hall. Seems like a reasonable, logical statement. Doesn't always work with students, right? So stop making those kinds of ultimatums. Kids do well if they can. If they can't, we got to find the skill gap or the stressor. This is on the slideshow if you'd like to look at it later, but it's a really good example of how you can reframe it. The won't side, you're being judgmental, the kids are willful and defiant. Kid's just lazy, she wants attention. She's rude. I don't want to tell you how often I hear phrases like that, right? So we need to go with rewards and punishments, make kids feel frustration, guilt, or shame. Instead, Ross Green wants us to see challenging behavior as a skill gap. We need to be curious, not judgmental. There's probably too many stressors or some skill deficits. What's getting in their way and how can I help? Right? We find and remove those barriers. Kids are going to feel supported and strengthened. So we find stressors, we reduce them. We find unmet needs and we meet them. We find skill deficits and we teach them. Is that clear enough? Do you understand what a shift this is from regular school? This is a tremendous shift. It is not easy. It is not easy to do restorative justice. It's a lot of time and a lot of energy, but do our students deserve that time and energy? Hell yes, they do. And if you're not willing to put the time and the energy that it takes to help them solve problems, to collaborate with them, to be with them as humans and not treat them as dogs that need to be trained, then this is not the place for you. That's the first 6. Sorry, that was the first 5. Here's number 6. Consequences do not solve problems or teach skills. I think we need to talk about what consequences are. Because we tend to think of them as these things like get kicked out of the room, get sent home, be suspended, be shamed or embarrassed. We're not going to do those kinds of things. There are natural consequences that happen when students don't exhibit the appropriate behavior. And by the way, kids will exhibit inappropriate behavior this summer. Returning teachers, am I right? They will. Well, do we have to deal with it? Yes, we do. It's part of the job. It's part of the job. Right? A consequence might be, you know what, we need to step outside and talk about this. Or you know what, I need some backup help. I need to call so-and-so or so-and-so to have a conversation. Right? That's a consequence. We got to talk about this. Here's a consequence. I'm going to hold you to a high enough standard that I'm not going to let this slide. So we're going to work on this. You know, during lunch, me and you, we got to chat. That's a consequence, right? Your behavior was not appropriate. We got to deal with it. We got to have a conversation. We got to go through the steps that April outlined for you, and we're going to learn more about in the next 2 weeks, right? Consequences in and of themselves. Get out, go home, be quiet. They don't teach the skills that kids need to re-engage in what we want them to do. Does that make sense? Now, certainly, we can rearrange seats if needed. We can address certain behavior in small ways. We could call consequences. You did something that's disrupting the flow of what we're doing here. I need to rearrange. I need to respond. A consequence is a response to an action, right? Those will happen. So it's not that we have consequence-free classrooms. but we got to think differently about what consequences are. All right? All right. So, time to go to your turn to talk partners. Which one stands out to you the most so far? I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, and everyone to put your stuff down, you can stand up. All right, so stretch a little bit. Move your arms around. Shake it out a little bit. If you're in the front, I want you to, in a moment, move to the back. If you're in the back, I want you to move to the front. If you're on the outside, move to the inside. If you're inside, move to the outside. I want you to find 1 or 2 people to talk to. No, you're not moving permanently. I want you to find some people to talk to that you're not sitting around right now about what this might look like. What I've been talking about so far, the first 6 points, what that might look like in the classroom. All right, I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes to do that. Number 7, meet students where they are. Right? Academically, socially, culturally, right? Wherever they are is where we're going to meet them. How do you know where they are? You have to ask. You have to find out, right? That can happen any number of ways. That can happen through some of the writing that they're doing in your class, because you're all literacy teachers. They're all going to be writing. You might want to have them write about themselves sometimes. You might have conversations with them before class. Maybe some of your lesson plans might give them opportunities to talk about themselves and who they are and where they're from, right? And not just in a Global Connect class where it might be easiest, right? Give them opportunities to share who they are and where they're. It might be you give them a pre-test, a diagnostic, to find out what their science knowledge is or math knowledge is before you start teaching. You get to know where they are, what they're capable of doing, so you can then tailor your lessons to what they need, right? And who they are, right? You might do nows and exit tickets. Actually, you will do nows and exit tickets. That's a great opportunity to learn where your students are, right? But then that has to have meaning. It has to go somewhere. So you don't just ask and find out. You have to do something with it, right? And you should tailor your lessons around it. It'll change how you have conversations with particular students, right? One of the good things that we have going on here at Student U is we have small class sizes, so you can get to know students. We don't overwhelm you with 100 kids a day, like many traditional teachers have, right? We give you a dozen or so you can know them. You can meet them where they are, so you're more likely to meet their needs, right? Does that make sense? Pretty easy one, right? Meet students where they are. I have a note in my notes. So by the way, my notes for this are also in the Google Drive folder. And I think I have a note that says to notice and share their brilliance, right? Some might call that, praising students. But to go with the student lingo, I like thinking about sharing their brilliance. That's everything from their note-taking skills, to they give you eye contact when you're talking, to way that they have kind of hung with you for 57 minutes without complaining so far, right? You can share their brilliance. Let them know, let everyone else know, right? Make that a regular part of what you do in the classroom. Number 8. It's an important one. Conversational English is not the same as academic English. Is anyone here willing to share with us, by a show of hand, that English is not your first language? Thank you. So you know what I'm talking about, right? And even if students, and I think we're getting close to 50% of our students who identify as English language learners, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Chicano, Chicana. If someone in their home speaks only Spanish, or they grew up speaking Spanish, and yet they are still conversational English, and we might consider them bilingual, that does not mean they are able to read complex academic English in the classroom. That make sense? Does that mean they have a learning disability? No? Does not mean that. Does not mean they have a developmental delay? Does not mean they're not on grade level at all. Studies have shown that it takes 5 to 7 years to learn academic English. And if they've been in school systems in which they're not being taught academic English, they can rely on conversational English, that maybe that 5 to 7 years hasn't started yet. You need to understand that. Again, is that a problem of our students or a problem of the system? Problem of the system, so we don't blame our students for that. We cannot confuse the two. They might sound American to you, right? They might know the latest slang and lingo and talk like everyone else, and if they were behind a curtain, you wouldn't know their skin color or where they were from. Does not matter, right? They're speaking another language primarily at home. They learn English as a second or third or fourth language. It will take them longer to do academic English. Have any of you had a world language, a different language in English in middle school or high school before? Anyone take another language? Okay. You remember when like you had vocabulary tests and like Spanish 1 and Spanish 2, like fill in the blank stuff and match it? You're like cool with that, right? And she's like, now you got to come up front and answer questions out loud. And you're like, whoa, hold on. Like that's a different ball game. Did you get to the level where you had to read and write in that language? It's hard, isn't it? Like you were getting by really good. Spanish 1, Spanish 2, French 1, French. You're like, I got this, because it's like vocabulary all the time. But then you get to like reading and writing in that other language that's not your own. It's like it takes you twice as long to read and write, doesn't it? At best. Think about that with our students who are learning English as an academic language for the first time. Okay? Any questions about that? Anything from my English language learners in here want to add to that? All right. Number 9. Teaching is emotional. You put your whole selves in your lesson plans, right? Some of you are nodding and smiling. You know what I'm talking about. Like you put your being into the work. You're trying to connect with kids. You put yourself out there. You feel vulnerable. There are days you feel happy. You're singing joy to the world. Everything's great. There are days you are tired and miserable. Maybe a little under the weather. Maybe you didn't get enough sleep. You're a little frustrated, a little grumpy, on the grouchy side, right? You're going to experience all kinds of emotions, aren't you? Returning teachers, you know what I'm talking about? Surprisingly emotional work, isn't it? We're not like sitting at a computer entering numbers in a spreadsheet. We're working with humans. It's emotional. Anyone get their buttons pushed last summer? Anyone babysat or taught at a summer camp or been in a job where someone like says something that irritates you and you're like, what? And all of a sudden you like got to work with a customer or work with a student and you got to overcome that in the moment? That's hard. For some, the emotional side of teaching is the hardest part. Lesson planning, done. Creativity, done. Being in front of people, done. Dealing with critical feedback from students, oh my God, I'm melting. It's hard, right? It's hard walking out of the door feeling like I just invested 4 hours in that lesson and it sucked. And I got to deal with that now. And I failed the kids. And my mentor saw it. It's emotional. I don't have a solution to this. I'm just telling you that's what it is, right? Like you got to work with it. Like one of the skills I had to learn over time is students would start pushing my buttons, and when I was a young teacher, I didn't know how to stop it, right? My response was to be reactive and pull out my trump card or the power that I had, right? I'm much bigger than them and I have a louder voice and I would intimidate them to stop it, right? Realized over time that, man, that's an awful person that comes out of me in the middle of my classroom. I don't want to do that anymore. So there were times, and yeah, my buttons are pushed, and I might get a few seconds into like, getting ready to roar, like take it out on the students and give it right back and realize, oh, I got to switch, I got to make a joke, I got to smile, I got to redirect. That's hard, right? But it's part of the job, right? Dealing with the emotions is part of the job, so be ready for that. I think the theme this morning was about taking care of ourselves, right? So getting good sleep, getting exercise, eating well. Those are not on the list. There should be 33 things. Sleep, eat well, exercise, take care of yourself. Okay? Because you're going to give a lot of yourself. You need to give some back. Because you're not your best self if you're not taking care of yourself. All right? There's some bonus points over there. Teaching is performative. Right? It's a performance. I'm putting on a show for you right now. I don't walk around my kitchen talking to my family like this. Right? I might sometimes. Especially if my kids push my buttons, but that's another story. So it's a performance, right? You prepare for it just like it's a performance, right? You're projecting your voice in different ways. There's some dynamics. Sometimes it's big and it's loud and it's boisterous and it's fun. Sometimes it's quiet and it's close range and you're working one-on-one, right? So you treat it much like a performance. It's actually a lovely metaphor because oftentimes performers, they don't do a lot of ad lib, having no plans. There's a script, right? They follow the script. And those who know the script best can then ad lib and riff off of that script because they know so well who the character is and what the scene is about and what the intention the director has. That's when they can move within and kind of move out of the structure because they've mastered the structure itself first. There's a lot of good metaphors about teaching as a performance. Right? Teaching is emotional, and teaching is performative, and teaching is relational. Right? Especially here at Student U. Now, it's not transactional. A lot of education is transactional. Ever taken an online course? That's transactional, right? There's some information that needs to be transacted from someone else into you. The lecture model is transactional. I don't need to know your names or your faces. I'm just going to give you information. I'm going to test you on it. You're going to give it back. That's a transaction. We don't do that here. Will there be some moments of transaction? Yes, we'll talk about that tomorrow. There will be little moments of transaction, but by and large, our work is relational. We have to know who our students are. We're invested in them as people. They're going to know a little bit about you and who you are, right? And that's going to make a lot of what we do work. It's because the work is relational. Does that make sense? Okay. If you are generally an introverted person like me, you're going to need to take care of yourself by having those moments where you can be alone and recharge and think, right? Maybe it's in your car on the drive. Maybe it's during breaks. Maybe it's pre-planned bathroom trips, right? Maybe it's going for a walk by yourself to get your thoughts together. Because so much of the work is this, right? It's being face-to-face with other people. If you're an extrovert, you might have a little bit of an advantage, right? Because you're used to and you crave a lot of that one-on-one interaction. We all have different needs. We all have different skill sets. We all have different strengths. You need to figure out what yours is so you can be your best self when you're in front of students because the work is relational. Okay? Number 12, this I think is our last one before we break. Effects are not always immediate. This is so important. The effects of your lesson might not be seen that day. You're working with students on on correcting some challenging behavior. It doesn't happen that class period. It doesn't happen the next day. Next week, it's not any better. You start to feel like a failure. I'm here to tell you, the effect of your work is not always immediate. You got that? We're working with adolescents, right? You ever been an adolescent? Technically, most of you probably still are, because adolescence now goes to 25, right? Your brain's still developing. You still have a little impulsivity left in you, right? Still some chemicals and hormones that aren't quite settled yet, okay? Same for our students, even more so for them. The effects of what happens this summer might not be seen this summer. That does not mean you're failing. Doesn't mean the work's not important or valuable. Right? You can file it under the emotional side of teaching. I put a lot of time, energy, and investment in this, and I'm not seeing the fruit of my labor, and it would feel really good if I could see some of the fruit of my labor. I'm here to tell you, it might not happen. It might. You might have some students that walk out saying, thank you, that was amazing. That was great. You might have a student come up and give you a hug and say, you're making a difference. I appreciate you. You might. You might not. You might have some kids who exhibit challenging behavior who they're not going to figure it out this summer, but you're playing an important role. And I'm going to close before I break with my story of one of my favorite students here, Trinesh. Does anyone know Trinesh? Just graduated this year. I was a mentor teacher when Trinesh was in 6th grade. Mentor teachers get together weekly. We talk about what our teachers' needs are, and if there are any students that need some extra support. Trinesh was always on the list. Always. I spent a lot of time with Trinesh because she was cussing out her teacher, and I had to go get her and take her out. And I'd be pulling her out of the class, some choice words were coming out of her mouth, and she would say, can you get him fired? So hard. So did not want to be at Student U. Did not appreciate the value or the opportunity of what was happening on a day-to-day basis. We did not send her home, did not kick her out. We walked and we talked, and others did the same. We got her back to the classroom and said to her teacher, we're going to try again. We're going to try again, we're going to try again. 7th grade, you think it got better? No, it got worse. It got worse in 7th grade. She would just walk in and just be like, and put her head down and go to sleep. Could not get her up, could not get her to do, I don't know if she did a thing the entire summer in 7th grade, okay? If there was a case, right, if you had the kids don't want to framework instead of or kids do well if they want to, kids do well if they can, you would say, she doesn't belong here. Some other kid would take advantage of this. 2 summers straight of just causing problems, being a pill, really. And there's some other words we could use. It was awful. I can't emphasize this enough. She was awful. She just graduated high school. She's going to UNC Chapel Hill. She was Bettina's intern last summer. She figured it out. Did she figure it out in 6th grade? No. Did she figure it out in 7th grade? No. I don't think she figured it out in 8th grade. Maybe not 9th grade. But eventually, she got there. The effects of your work might not be immediate. That does not change the importance of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Does that story resonate? There are other stories like that too. She is not the only one, but she is my favorite example because I saw it face to face and spent a lot of time with her. And it makes me incredibly proud of the work that happens at Student U, right? That's why we're here. And I think with that, we're going to talk to a turn and talk partner for 2 minutes, and then we're going to come back together. So talk about which one of the 12 points we've been through already do you have more questions about? 2 minutes. Go. Has anyone learned anything so far? Anyone found anything valuable? Can I get a couple people just to share with us kind of a tidbit you're going to take with you that you maybe needed to hear this morning, or has made you reframe your thinking a little bit, or something you're going to carry with you this summer? Yes.
As far as us all teaching literacy,
Yeah.
as a math teacher, well, I was reflecting on how math was always something that I was pretty good at,
Yep.
and not necessarily understanding the foundation as to why,
Yep.
what helped me.
Yep.
And being that I learned to read from an early age, that probably incorporated a lot into my comprehension of math problems and made it easier for me to grasp. But now that
Yep.
I have that reflection of myself, I can assist my students who might not be able to read through the problem to get to them.
Yep. Very good. We're all literacy teachers, even in math class. Someone else? Yeah.
When you said saviors are not needed, that was it with me because like not every kid needs to be saved, but some kids just need guidance and help.
Yep. They need someone to walk alongside them. They need a friend, they need a mentor, they don't need a savior, right? They need someone who's just going to be there with them. They need a support system, right? Like we've all had support systems in our lives. We're a support system for our kids, we're not their saviors, right? Absolutely. Anyone else?
Over here.
Yep.
Teaching is emotional. I thought that was a good analogy.
Yeah.
And just giving us like the space to feel that.
Yeah. You're allowed to feel the emotions, right? It's okay. Nothing wrong with you if you experience the emotions of teaching. We all do. Yes, ma'am.
Going with the emotions, number 12, effects are not immediate. Don't take it personal if your, practice aren't working right away. Continue to stay consistent.
Yep. Absolutely. There's an important point there with the emotions. If I'm not seeing immediate effects, I'm not going to take it personally, right? Oftentimes our students, they're not acting out of spite for you specifically as an individual. They're responding to other things going on, right? And sometimes it's crazy things going on in an adolescent brain, right? Sometimes it's beyond explanation. Like sometimes we look a little too hard, right? Like a lot of people like to go to the home life really quickly. Maybe something's going on at home. Maybe there's something going on here. Maybe something happened at lunch. And sometimes things are just going on, right? You ever been there in life before? You're like, I am crying, I do not know why. Or man, I have been ill all day today. I do not know why I have been ill all day today. I am honking my horn at people, and I don't know why. I just feel the need today to do that, right? We all experience it. Sometimes our students will, right? We can't take it too personal. Thank you for that point. Anyone else? Yeah?
I think just the quality of the community system is like really rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
It's not like
Good. Thank you. And we had a book recommendation. Oh, what's the book, Bree? Oh, I got you when you're drinking water.
It's something called Push Out, the criminalization of young black girls.
Push Out.
Push Out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, Michelle Alexander has the now, I think, classic must-read, The New Jim Crow. If you're interested in reading more about mass incarceration, read Ta-Nehisi Coates, The Atlantic. If you want more background in that. I heard someone talking over here in one of the breaks about the school-to-prison pipeline, right? And how we are preparing some students to go directly from preschool to prison because of our punitive system, where they never learn the skills that they need to overcome the obstacles that are in front of them, right? So they're set up for that failure. I had an amendment I wanted to add. I talked to Alex Lowe at the break. Can I add a little bit to the Trinesh story for you all? So not only was Trinesh very difficult and foul-mouthed in 6th grade and extremely defiant and obstinate in 7th grade, I heard there was a little maturity in 8th grade. I hope I get this right, Alex. She was told so often that if she couldn't say anything nice, she shouldn't say anything at all. So So she decided she was going to start a silent strike and not speak at all in class. And to point to her leadership abilities, she convinced her classmates to join the strike with her. So a teacher would be in class trying to talk, and none of the students would say anything. Is this true?
True. 45 minutes every class period for about 3 weeks straight.
3 weeks straight, kids are on a silent strike because of her. That's what I'm talking about, right? This is what we were doing. We had a wonderful mentor teacher that year, Jeremy, who would come to Alex and be like, I don't know what to do. Like, this is beyond. And again, the trajectory that she is on now is amazing, right? Effects are not always immediate. All right, we need to go through these a little bit more quickly than we have in the past. All right, number 13, teach all children. Right? No matter who's in your classroom, no matter what the needs are, you're going to teach them all. Here's an important point about assessment that I want to make. When you're trying to figure out what students are learning in your class, or when you're getting students to participate, you cannot just call on the same 3 students over and over again, right? I've been in several classrooms in Durham Public Schools this spring, and I have told teachers afterwards, that was a wonderful lesson for 3 students. You had 3 that were engaged, and you engaged them the whole time. The other 27, they could have been doing anything else that they wanted to. You didn't even know what they were doing. I saw kids on their phones. I saw kids taking naps. You didn't see them. You didn't teach all of the students. You taught 3. It happens a lot for beginning teachers. Their minds are so much focused on their lesson, and they're excited to get a few to participate, and they keep going to the same ones over and over again. Those are often the kids that are already doing well, and oftentimes the kids who don't do well, don't raise their hands, don't participate, they're the ones that need you the most. So you have to be very intentional about reaching all the students in your class. We're going to talk about some strategies tomorrow for doing that. Okay? Teach all children. Warm demanders are most effective. Right? There's research on this that goes back a couple decades. I believe this was mentioned in Lisa Delpit's book, Multiplication is for White People. Right? If you haven't gotten to the Warm Demanders chapter yet, I recommend you read it. Because the studies show that successful teachers in the hardest schools, particularly with kids of color, again, the system is set up against them, teachers who are very warm, but also demanding, meaning they have high expectations. Doug Lamov in his book, Teach Like a Champion, calls the technique or strategy warm strict, right? I can hold you to high expectations. I can keep you on task. I can expect 100%. I'm not going to let you opt out, but I'm going to do it with a smile on my face. I'm going to tell you that I care about you and I want you to succeed, and that's why I'm holding you to these expectations. The 2 can coexist at the same time, right? If you remember from April's presentation yesterday, the square with the 4 boxes, right? The upper right-hand corner was high levels of control and high levels of support. So control, demanding, expectations, strict, it's kind of like all in the same family, right? You're going to run a tight ship. It's going to be highly structured. You're going to hold students to high expectations, but you're going to support them and be warm with them the entire time. Have you ever had a teacher that had high expectations and was cold? Not a good combo, is it? You don't really want to be there. You might learn something, but you're like, eh. You ever had teachers that were both, they were lax, very low on the demands, and very cold at the same time? I feel like a lot of my substitute teachers were like that, right? Not very effective. Not a lot of demands, not very warm, right? Warm demanders are most effective. By the way, in my notes in the Google Drive folder, there's links to over half of these to other readings that you could do to follow up if you would like. 15, reframe the narratives about our students. Okay, this is going to take a few minutes. There are narratives that exist about our students. And what do I mean by our students? Right? I mean, who's our population? Who's our demographic? What is student you exist? Who are we helping? Who are we working with? Largely, students of color, students who have been marginalized in the school system, students who might have experienced poverty, other hardships, right? These are students for whom the existing school system doesn't always work. And we're here to provide that extra support, walk alongside them. Does that make sense? There are cultural narratives, right? Narratives that exist in our culture about people. We often call them stereotypes and assumptions, right? These are narratives, stories about them, right? Do you know any stereotypes or assumptions about people? There's a pretty prominent one right now about immigrants. People who come to our country from other places, right? Despite our country's history being a place where immigrants come to, right? There's this common narrative now, they don't belong. That's a narrative that exists. So when we reframe narratives, when we have a student who we might or might know is documented, undocumented, they or their family maybe immigrated here at some point or another, what message do we want them to hear? You belong. We reframe the narrative they might hear outside of student meeting. You belong. Welcome. We want you here. Are there narratives that exist about black men? Do we know what those are? We don't need to talk about them because we all know them, right? That's how narratives work. We all know them. How do we reframe that? Is there a narrative about black men being scholars and CEOs? No, it's different, isn't it? So what do we do to reframe that narrative? I see that academic ability. I see your strength. I see what you're giving our community. I see your talents. You're an artist. You're a leader. You're a hard worker. You are gifted. Right? That's how you reframe the narrative. Is there a narrative about women in science? Women in math? What do we say to our young girls? But before that, what do young girls most often hear when they get a compliment? What's it about? Their appearance. Is that what's most important? Is that what student is all about? No. So what needs to come out of our mouth? I know it's nice to say, I like your hair, I like your clothes, that's okay. I'm not even going to say do that, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? What does matter? You are good at math. You are good in science. Your ability to solve problems is unreal. You are persistent, right? I saw that you were struggling, and you stuck with it until you got it. We reframe the narratives, right? Are there more immigrants, black men, women in science and math? There are others, right? Your accent's a little bit different. You might not be from here. You might not be able to read or write well, right? Or you come from this zip code, you come from this background, this kind of school is not for you. We don't do that. Wow, you have impressed me so much the last 2 weeks. Where have you been thinking about going to college? Right? Do you know what the Ivy League is? Let's talk about that, because pretty soon you're going to be on a bus, you're going to go to the Northeast, and you're going to see some schools. Maybe you should think about those, right? Reframe the narrative. Does that make sense? This often doesn't appear in your lesson plan, but it's in your daily interactions. You have to help narrate a different story for them. This is narrative work, it's identity work, it's really important. Did you ever have someone in your life that spoke this into you, that saw something in you and let you know about it? You're really good at this. You could be a good teacher one day. You could really excel at this. I see this in you. Anyone have someone in their life like that? Be that person this summer for all of your students. Find their brilliance and share it. And speak back to these negative stereotypes and assumptions that they often have to work with outside of students. Right. Number 16, identities matter. Your identity matters. The kids' identities matter. Identities are fluid. They change. Some of you are still trying to figure out who you are, right? So are your students. In some ways, I still am too, right? It's something that really never goes away. But who you are matters. If you're a woman standing in front, if you identify as a woman, that matters. If you identify as a male, you're in front of the students, that matters. The color of your skin, it matters. Your sexuality matters, your religion, your culture, your language, that matters. You bring your whole self into the classroom. Your students are bringing their whole selves in, so identities matter. It's important to recognize. At some point during orientation, we will start talking explicitly about race and about gender and about class and about sexuality, right? About religion, right? These things do matter. How they come out changes day to day, summer to summer. But we want to be there with students as they're processing who they are, at the same time recognizing you're processing who you are. Right? So there needs to be space in the work that we do for our identities to grow and to change, for us to explore who we are. Number 17, create a safe and inclusive learning environment. So safe and inclusive. Safe means they're physically safe. Right? There's no harassment. There's no sarcasm. Let me say that again. There's no sarcasm. If you don't believe me, look up the definition of sarcasm. It should be pretty clear why we don't want it in the classroom. Kids need to feel physically safe, they need to feel emotionally safe, they need to be able to take risks academically. We're going to talk about a strategy on Thursday to help make this happen. Okay? The physical layout of the room is going to matter. There's a session on that. Where kids are positioned in the classroom in relation to the teacher matters. Right? How you talk to students, your tone of voice, your nonverbal cues, the eye contact you give. Right? All this creates a safe and inclusive environment. No matter who the students are, no matter what their needs are, you're going to accept them, you're going to be with them, you're going to meet their needs. These strategies down here come from a study that was done in UNC in Chapel Hill school system. And Greg Meyer, who's a representative in the state legislature, came to Student U a couple summers ago to talk about this research in particular. I have a link in my document. It's in the folder if you want to go read a KQED article that summarized this research. But they asked kids of color in Chapel Hill because there was a large achievement gap, as there is in most places. Again, that's not an issue with students, that's an issue of the system. But there is a gap, and so they talked to students of color about what they needed from their teachers. And this is what was concluded. I want to be seen. I want to be known. Notice me, right? Again, eye contact, proximity, being close to them, kneeling down and being at eye level, being with them, creating safe space. Like they want to feel like they belong, and it's a safe place to be. They're not intimidated or scared when they walk into the classroom. Connect to students' lives. It means you have to know what's going on in their lives, and connect to their culture, which means you have to know what their culture is. We can't rely on assumptions when doing this kind of work. If something dealing with race comes up, address it. Don't pretend race doesn't exist. We all know it exists. Don't pretend otherwise. And then connect to our future selves. Don't just meet us where we are, but talk about where we're going to go. Help us get ready for what's next. That was the advice of high school students of color in Chapel Hill. Does that sound good? Again, you can read more about those later. We're going to create safe and inclusive learning environments. For some, this is more challenging than it sounds. It sounds easy, right? Middle schoolers start talking. They have tendencies. They're trying to show one another up. They're trying to create a hierarchy. They're trying to undermine the teacher's authority. These things happen. It takes work to create a safe and inclusive learning environment. Number 18, assign seats and groups. And some people are under the false belief that if they give students the choice of where to sit, kids are going to be happy and all groups are going to be perfect. I'm here to tell you it causes more problems. You might, I didn't assign you seats, so you're thinking, wait a second, we could sit where we want. That's right, you're more or less young adults who can make these choices. And I might ask you to sit somewhere different tomorrow or sit next to different people tomorrow. But have you ever been in a classroom where you didn't feel safe, or you didn't feel like you belonged, and you didn't have anyone to sit with, or you felt like there was a group that was a clique and they did things together and they got more attention from the teacher and you were kind of on the outside? Has anyone ever felt that before? Those dynamics exist, and we do not want those dynamics to exist in our classroom. This undermines a safe and inclusive learning environment because it creates in-groups and out-groups, right? Maybe you've never thought about this before because you've always been on the in-group and it's been good for you. I'm here to tell you, empathize with those who have not been on the in-group, who don't have anyone to sit with, who feel left out, who feel like the smarter kids gather together because they want to do well and I'm not in the smart group, therefore I'm not smart. We don't want that to happen. So you assign seats and groups intentionally. Sometimes it can be so there's mixed ability, mixed genders. And you know what? We don't want any groups to stay together for long periods of time. You could change those assigned seats every day if you want. In fact, that might be a good practice. And when kids say, why do we have to sit with different people? I want to sit with him. You know what we're doing here? We're learning to work together. That's what we're doing here. It's one of the skills we're learning. We're learning how to collaborate and work with one another. We want to get to know each other. And then tomorrow you might sit next to someone else. And the next day someone else. Because we're all going to learn how to work with each other because we're a team here. We're a family. Right? We don't get to say, I don't want to sit with you. I want to sit with you. We're not about that. Does that make sense? This is a hard one for some to grapple with because they feel like this choice is really important. I'm here to tell you it causes problems. Right? So assign those seats in those groups. This point actually comes from an article that I linked to in the other document. It's called 5 Ways That Teachers Provoke Misbehavior. And the author, Eric Chashalis, again has said, I've seen teachers set students up for failure by their actions. And again, if we follow that other line of thinking from Ross Greene to how schools are like prisons and we rely on punitive punishments, teachers provoke misbehavior kids respond negatively, and then they get the punitive consequences as a result. That happens a lot, and teachers do certain things that provoke misbehavior. He says, don't let them choose their own seats. There's 4 other points he makes in there. Another one of the points he makes is don't highlight ability differences. You got to be careful because we're sharing brilliance. If you're sharing 4 kids' brilliance over and over again, 6 kids are noticing that you're not calling out their brilliance. So you got to make sure that it's shared equitably, right? And for some kids, it might be easy to see brilliance, and some kids might be a little bit harder. But it's going to be there. You got to find it. I believe I made that point. Your turn to talk, partner. Which one that we've been talking about so far might be the most difficult for you? 1. All right, we're going. Number 19. Now we're going to start moving in the direction of what Luke's going to do right after this one. Lesson plans matter. Your planning matters, right? Returning teachers, lesson plans matter, right? They do. So planning takes time. I'll have a lot of points I want to make up here. It is not as easy as some other tasks because it's complex, right? Teaching is complex, so planning for that complexity is complex, right? There's a lot of parts going on. You got to be thinking about them all. Students deserve the time. I know sometimes it feels like, you know what, I'll just do a little shortcut. I'll just play this video and ask a few questions and we'll see where it goes. Actually, no. You need to plan more thoughtfully. What questions are you going to ask? Have you watched the video yet? Do you know the spots where the students might struggle or they might be most captivated? Like, what's going to be the point that you connect to that's related to what you're going to read next? Like, that's all got to be thought through. The students deserve that time you put in to your lesson, right? Here's another point. Radical teaching does not mean a lack of structure or rigor, right? For a lot of us, we want to be revolutionary, liberatory, right? We want to take different approaches. And tomorrow, I'm going to talk about different approaches besides just a transactional model of teaching that's much more engaging and hands-on and embodied, right? That does not mean there's no structure, right? It does not mean you just sit on your desk, kick your shoes off, and like, geez, let's just talk for a little while. That's not a lesson plan, right? That's a recipe for chaos, right? Because number 1, having discussions is a skill that I was pretty sure you all have, but middle schoolers don't often have the skill to listen and then discuss. They have to be taught how to do so, right? So just sitting, talking is not a lesson plan. So yes, we're going to be radical, but we're going to have lots of structure and lots of rigor. That makes sense? Once you have mastered structure and rigor, then you can deviate a little bit. You can ad-lib, right? You can do something that's not as planned because, again, like an actor or actress, you ad-lib only when you know the script by heart. And then finally, content expertise is not enough. Some of you know the math really well. Some of you know English up one side and down the other. You're great readers and writers. Some of you know science. You love science. Knowledge. Have you ever had a high school teacher, college professor who you knew was really smart, but you weren't learning much? Yeah, right? Content expertise is not enough. That led Lee Shulman in the 80s to write about what he calls pedagogical content knowledge. Right? He kind of puts these ideas together that it's not just content knowledge that you need, which organizations like Teach for America believe are most important. We'll get really smart people, right, who know content really well. They'll be really good teachers with minimal training, right? That's not their model. Their model is about content knowledge. Lee Shulman said it's pedagogical content knowledge. You got to know how to teach that content, right? So content expertise is not enough. I will add this, and math is a really good example. A lot of math teachers are really good at math, right? And that's the reason is because you didn't struggle much with it, which makes it really hard when you're trying to explain it to a kid who doesn't get it, because you're like, it's right there. That's so obvious, right? Because it's obvious to you because numbers work for you. So you have to think about a time when you struggled with something and put yourself in that student's shoes. And you have to think about other ways of explaining it, right? So content expertise is not enough. 20, begin with the end in mind. We can teach a whole course on this for a semester. Grant Wiggins and Jay McTeague wrote a book called Understanding by Design. There are links to a couple chapters in the other document. Beginning with the end in mind, very simple. We do this a lot in life. We're going to have a party next weekend. We start imagining what's going to happen at the party, and then we plan backwards, right, to make it all happen. Who's going to come? What are we going to eat? What are we going to do? How are they going to know about it? How are they going to get here? What's the time frame? We plan everything in advance, so at that moment, everything happens. Same for lesson planning, We can think about beginning with the end in mind for the entire summer. Where do we want students to be at the end of 6 weeks? It can be about your everyday lesson. Where do I want students to be when I start planning at the end of the lesson? What do I want them to know and be able to do? And then the most important question is, how are you going to know? It doesn't exist because it came out of your mouth. You have to check in with students. This is a reminder of the importance of assessment, which we'll talk about a little bit later, right? They have to be measurable, and you have to check in with every one of your students. Begin with the end in mind. 21. Connect curriculum to the lives of students. I don't know how connected you are with what's going on in their lives. Again, we have to meet them where they are. We have to ask. We have to know what's important to them. Didn't someone have a new album out with Drake or Kanye or somebody like that? Okay, obviously I don't know a whole lot. But if that's important to my students, I might do a little reading about that. I might listen to a few tracks. I might, if they know one of the songs or reference it, I might bring it in somehow, right? I don't know. I don't know how it connects to my math lesson, but I'll be thinking about it. Because I might think it's pretty cool if I bring in Drake to their math lesson, right? That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Right? No. Yes? What about a TV show that they watch? Something on Netflix that's streaming that all of them have seen lately. Is there a storyline that you can bring into English class? You gotta be careful though, because sometimes it's not everyone's thing. You gotta spread it around to meet all students' needs. But there's ways you can connect to things that are interesting to them and that are relevant to their lives, right? Chris Emden calls this reality pedagogy. Again, another reference to Chris Emden at Teachers College. He wrote about reality pedagogy in a couple different ways. It's also in his book, For White Folks Who Teach in the Hood. He actually builds on the idea of culturally responsive teaching, also called culturally relevant pedagogy, which in the 80s and 90s, there were scholars of color who were looking at successful teachers, so particularly black students, right? And those teachers were incorporating the culture of their students and what they were doing in the classroom, right? Oftentimes, it's called cultural mismatch, when the teacher has no idea about the culture and home customs of the students, and the way students are supposed to act in school is very different from the way they act at home, and they build what's going on at home is wrong, and it has to be taken out of the students when it's school. And again, we add that to the prison-like system and the punitive punishments, and it's a recipe for disaster, right? So they're like, no, incorporate the culture. But what Chris Emden and others have found out is that teachers often base culture on stereotypes and assumptions. Oh, I got black kids in my class. I know what that means. Oh, I got Spanish speakers in my class. I know what that means. And their cultural responsiveness is playing on stereotypes and assumptions and not the kids in the class. Does that make sense? So he's moved past that and called it reality pedagogy. Know the reality of the students in your class. Right? Ask essential questions. If you want to know what essential questions are, again, there's a link in the document. They're open-ended, they're broad, they're interesting, they have multiple answers. It is not like a question on a test, whereas what is the atomic number of carbon? That is not an essential question. Could humans survive on Mars? A good essential question. Could we? I don't know. It would have to happen. See how it's open and it leads to other questions and other wanderings? So there's a good reading on here on essential questions. They should play a role in your lesson plans because they are interesting. Returning teachers. Your students walk into Student U every day going, yes, I can't wait to learn. Teach me. Do they do that? No. I talked before about motivation not being the core responsibility that we have. That's true on the one hand to make Ross Green's point. On the other hand, we do have to make what we do interesting to them, right? We cannot bore them all day long. We need to connect their lives. Asking essential questions is one way to do that. We'll get to the end. Give feedback early and often. Daily, multiple times in your lesson. Oftentimes it's called formative assessment. It's not a quiz or a test. It's the everyday work they're doing. Walking around, seeing their work while they're writing. Giving them feedback, asking questions. Really good response there. That's great. Can you share that with the class in a moment? I'm not sure you got this one right. What is the question asking again? How might you rephrase that? Regular feedback, early and often, especially on student writing, because we found for many, many years that students tend to struggle a lot with writing. Reading, all right, we're getting there. Math, okay. Writing, really challenging. Feedback early and often on their writing. 24, script your lessons. Alex Lowe is my go-to example for this when she was teaching at Student U. She scripted her lessons. Is that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what
I
script?
made all my roommates listen today.
And then practice in front of her roommates. You know, do you script your lessons so you can read a script in the middle of class? No. It's so you can get all your thinking out beforehand. Have you ever been in a situation where you thought you knew something and you start talking and it's like, I'm not sure that makes sense. Any returning teachers have lessons like that where you're like, I'm not sure I know how to do this math problem. I'm having a hard time finding the theme of this story. Theme, that's a really good question. I'm not sure. Right? And all of a sudden you're on the spot. And you realize you're not a content expert and you didn't script it out. You're not well planned. The script is so you can just get out all your thoughts about what you're going to say, what the students might say. Good opportunity to maybe guess at what misconceptions students might have, what they might get wrong, other ideas they might have. And then you go through, and then Alex, what was your next step after you scripted it out? You didn't bring it with you in the class. What did you have in the class?
I brought one sheet of blank paper, and I would chunk it into sections, and I would give myself bullet points, and then highlight the words I wanted to say exactly.
Yep. And the other important part you told me yesterday was the time, right?
Yeah.
So once it's scripted, again, that's for you and your preparation. And then it's like, okay, I need a sheet in front of me to guide me. And by the way, I do this all the time. Right now, my PowerPoint is my guide. I don't remember all my 30 points. This is my structure. I often go to class, I have notes written down of things I want to go through. I have an agenda that I create to keep the structure in place. That's your piece of paper. Have it on a clipboard. Use a highlighter. Make notes as you go, especially if it's the first time you're teaching. You want to make some changes for the next time you teach it. That's a good way to plan, but it starts with scripting. Does that make sense? Is this beneficial for you to do this? Is it beneficial for your students if you do this? Are they worth your time? Yes, they are. Is it something you might get excited about? Probably not, because it does take time. But they're worth it, and it's important, and it makes you a better teacher. So, of the ones we've been talking about so far, which ones do you think you need a little more time to think about? I'll give you one quick minute to talk about one you might need a little more time with, of the 24 points we've been through already. All right, we're in the home stretch. 25 this is the last group. 25. Answer questions with questions. Answer questions with questions. A friend of mine who's a really good teacher, he's a 4th grade teacher in Durham, and I've been in his classroom several times. This is one of his greatest strengths. He does not answer questions directly to his students. And you know why? He's not trying to be difficult, although the kids sometimes perceive it as difficult. He wants them to do the cognitive work. Sometimes asking a question is about just wanting a shortcut, right? Or teachers are supposed to know. If I don't know, I will ask the teacher, and there's some truth to that, right? But sometimes it's important just to, if a student says, I don't understand this problem. I don't get it. Well, tell me what you see. I see 2x minus 1 equals 4. Okay? What do you think our goal is in this problem? Maybe figure out what x is? Exactly. How do you think we're going to figure out what x is? You see how it's just a constant questioning process? I don't know what to write. Well, what does the prompt say? The prompt says to write about a time in life that I was scared. Have you ever been scared? I don't know. Let's think about it. What are some things that might scare people? You see how this works? I think it's this constant prompting. It's never like, well, write about the time that, someone jumped around in the corner and scared you. Don't give them that. You've got to work to get them there. Will this take more time with students? Yes. Do they deserve your time? Yes. It's helping them do the thinking process. Answer questions with questions. 26. Plan more than you need. I believe this point was made earlier. Having a full toolbox. There's a number of reasons to plan more than you need. Sometimes your lesson that you think will take 45 minutes takes 22. And then it's like, oh no, what do I do? Who wants to go play outside? No. There's other times to play outside. We want you to teach, right? So have more. And then sometimes, some of your kids are going to get it, They're going to be on it. And they're going to need something extra. And so you're going to need a little bit extra too. Some might call this differentiation. Having something different for kids at different levels, right? And it's okay. Some kids still working on the 4 questions that you had already planned, and they need some time to work with this one. That's great. You have something to finish. It's like, oh, you finished? I've got a great set of challenge questions for you. Are you up for the task? Because I really think this would help you build your skills even more. right? You notice how you frame that as another opportunity for learning instead of extra work because you're finished, right? So having more to be able to extend and enrich is really important. Plus that means you thought deeply about the lesson and what students need to know and be able to do, and you can add more than you need. 27, maintaining high expectations. Sometimes when you work with kids, it's tempting sometimes to let pity win over. Oh, she's had such a hard day. I'm not going to push her anymore right now. He's probably tired, so I'll just let him sleep. Well, those things might be true. But is that teaching our kids the skills they need to succeed in life? No. We can be empathetic. We can maybe get to a root cause of what's going on. But still, at the same time, we need to hold our students to high expectations. We don't want to give our students permission to fail, right? We don't want them to opt out. There's a story in a chapter by Gloria Ladson Billings. The book is called The Skin That We Speak. And the title of the chapter is a quote from a young student, a first grade student, and it's called "I Ain't Writing Nothing." And she was in a classroom observing, and the teacher, who was very kind, very warm, but not very demanding, was giving students opportunities to write. And this little girl said, "I ain't writing nothing." He's like, "Okay, maybe not today, maybe later she'll write." But she repeatedly went in the classroom, and repeatedly the girl kept saying, "I ain't writing nothing." And he kept letting her off the hook. And she said that teacher was giving her permission to fail. So while her classmates were getting ahead, she was behind. And the teacher was not holding her to high expectations. Make sense? We cannot do that. We have to hold our students to high expectations. Right? There's another example in a book called Why Race and Class Matter in School. It's by Tyrone Howard, one of my favorite examples. He's a black scholar at UCLA. He had a 5-year-old in kindergarten. And he came home one day, his son came home one day, and his reading scores were they were absent. They weren't there, like incomplete. So he goes to the teacher, he's like, why is my son not doing reading? She's like, well, I give him the option to go to the reading corner or to the art corner, and your son keeps going to the art corner. He's like, don't give him that option. If his classmates are learning to read and practicing their reading, he needs to read. And as a black scholar with a young black male, he's like, you're giving him permission to fail. He's falling behind. Don't do that. Not that art's not important, right? Art is important. Does that make sense? Because sometimes we can't let pity or permission to fail lower our expectations. 28. Do not blame the students for your own shortcomings. Students are responding negatively, the lesson didn't go well. You cannot walk away going, God, if these students just cared, that lesson would have been awesome. I mean, if the students would just be quiet and do the work, I'd be an awesome teacher, right? That's not what we do, right? We reflect on our own selves and our own practice first, right? If you co-planned with some people and they're afterwards like, what a rockin' lesson we planned, and you're like, man, mine did not go well at all. I could barely get through it. You must have easier kids than I do. No, can't do that. All right? You clear on this? You got to be like, whoa, talk to me about what you did. Can I come observe you in a little bit? I want to talk to my mentor. I need to see some other teachers because I gotta fix what I'm doing. I gotta see how I can get better. That make sense? We're not going to blame the students. Trust your mentor teachers. 29. They're here for you. Use their expertise, talk to them about curriculum, run ideas by them, ask them to come observe you. They say, I'll come observe you twice this week. Say, can you do 4 times? I really got this lesson on Tuesday I'm excited about. Would you come see it? I want some feedback immediately. Use them and their expertise. And use others besides the mentors. If Alex Lowe is available, ask Alex to come watch you teach. If Ms. Bettina is available, ask her to come watch you teach, right? Get feedback, rely on others for support. And lastly, bring your joy. You have knowledge and experience and passions and ideas that are going to make this summer better than we could have imagined. Bring that with you. right? Bring who you are. This is actually a lead-in to what I'm going to talk to you about tomorrow. The title of tomorrow's session is not Swimming with Elephants. It is called Making Soup. And we're going to talk about making soup tomorrow, and bringing your joy is going to have to do with the ingredients that you bring when we're making soup this summer. Okay? That is a metaphor, that is not literal. Although I do like soup. If you did want to make soup, I'd be down for that. All right? So you're going to bring your joy. All right. So, talk to your turn to talk partner. Which one of the 30 did you need to hear the most today? I'll give you 2 minutes. All right. Okay. I've been thinking about a couple of things as I've been talking. This session is not meant to be, okay, I talked about it, so you all have it. We don't need to talk about it ever again. Again, there are documents in the Google Drive folder to look at, to remind yourself. This should be something, these are things you should think about the entire summer, right? You should live on in conversation, some of the language that you use, some of the focuses that you have. It should affect your lesson planning, your interactions with students, so you can reference the resource. And again, there are some extensions in there for you to look at. I was thinking how I've heard a lot from the front row because of the structure of the seating. And I haven't had a chance to hear. And I kind of look and I try to listen. Y'all aren't speaking loud enough. So I feel like as a teacher, I've missed out on a lot of the conversations that I want to hear as a facilitator, right? So does the physical layout of a room matter? Yeah, right? It changes like what you're able to do. Like you all are like cut off from me. And I don't like that. So there's something to think about. I know there's a session on the physical layout, and we're going to talk tomorrow about how we can rearrange furniture in the classroom to engage in different ways of teaching. I want to bring that to your mind because it's important, especially when students are doing like small group discussions and writing. You need to be able to access everyone in the classroom, right? You have to have walking pathways. Okay. A couple points before we do one more activity, then we're going to turn it over to Luke. A couple people who maybe haven't spoken yet about something that you heard today that has resonated, or something you needed to hear, something that you were nodding your head with, or you snapped to, or something that's new you hadn't thought about before. Can I get maybe 2 or 3 people just to share, to bring something up maybe we haven't talked about yet? Yes.
I think you made a really good point when you said do not blame students for shortcomings, because I think it's kind of like it's hard to balance between like thinking whether something's your fault, like I could have pushed for the students, or I guess like being worried for that. And I think throughout the summer, like that would be a challenge.
Yeah. It is a challenge, right? Sometimes it's very easy to blame others for things that don't go well, right? It's sometimes a good knee-jerk reaction. But we can't, right? And I appreciate the honesty there. Like sometimes it's like, well, these kids were just disciplined, or I can't give them the kind of discipline that they need. Again, there's that mentality that the punitive consequences, what would help them shape up and would make my teaching a whole lot better, right? There's just a lot of the points that I talked about overlapped in those complex ways, right? Because we've got to bring the emotions into that piece, and the school to prison pipeline into that piece, and the academic skills that might be lacking into that piece, our own perceptions about what kids need, right? At this age comes into that piece. So yeah, I appreciate that. We're going to try as hard as we can not to blame students for our shortcomings. Will students push our buttons and challenge us? Yeah. Are some of them going to walk in not ready for our lessons and choose to be like Pranesh? Yeah, they might. But we're going to overcome, right? That's what we're here to do. We're the adults. Another point. Yes?
We were talking for the last question you asked, like what resonated the most, and I was saying that I feel like I need to hear everything today. Basically, I'm a first-time teacher, so I've been basically trying to figure out my that direction, and it just reinforced that everything is really complex, but we have to bring our whole selves to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for that. All right, so this was very different from our last sessions that I've done for years. I hope it worked. If not, we will not see it again next year. Or I won't be here next year, or who knows. But I hope there was something for everybody. I think one of the advantages of having diverse levels of experience in the room, I hope there was 1 point out of 30 that maybe you needed to hear at least, and maybe more, or maybe reinforce some things for you. If you had some hunches already, like, yeah, I'm down with that. And even if you're like me, you've been teaching for a long time, these are really good reminders. And side note, confession, just because I know all this doesn't mean I always know how to practice it too, right? I got to keep myself in check, right? I got to be careful whose brilliance I'm sharing, who I make eye contact with in the classroom, who I call on, if I give wait time. Just because I know this and can teach about it doesn't mean I always do it automatically. It's constant work, okay? So know that, no matter where you are in the level of experience. Okay, so do you have access to technology? Yeah? Can some of y'all pull something up? I want to just do a quick 5-minute look at the 6th grade, week 1, day 1 lesson plan.
Sorry.
It looks like this. It'll probably take you 5 clicks to get there. We can email to everyone. I imagine there's a curriculum folder, a science folder, maybe a 6th grade folder. And I think our mentor, Jacob Martin, has put together a pretty good lesson. And I wanted you to see the templates that we have this year, because the mentors are going to provide some of the structure on the left. What we'll talk about tomorrow as our main ingredients for our soup that we're going to make. The main ingredients are given to you. And then you're going to have some other spots that you fill in on the lesson plan template. Is this accessible to some of you? Have some of you found it?
I'm not sure.
But that's okay, we'll watch.
Middle school teachers should not have access to it. I'm trying to have access to it.
Thank you, Luke. If you want to look on with someone who has access to it, we're just going to do a quick glance at what's on the template and what you'll be working with this summer. So the content doesn't matter as much as the structure that we're looking at right now.
I actually have those for
Hey, what have you noticed so far? What's standing out to you? There's probably 10 things we could say. Let's probably get 3. So there's a thinking about my student section. Does anyone know why that's there? What if that section is not there? What might teachers who are planning not think about? What the students are doing. And it is kind of comical, but it happens, right? Because the lesson plan is about what they're doing. And they don't realize that, oh, if I'm not paying attention to what my students are doing, they might be sitting the entire time, or taking notes, reading, taking notes, taking a test for 45 minutes. Like, that's probably not optimum for 7th graders. So it gets you thinking about what the students are going to be doing, so you can have that in your mind while you're planning. So there's a variety of things they're doing. What else do you notice about this lesson plan template and the structure in it? You can even look at some of the content that Jacob's put in there. Anything interesting? Detailed, organized. How many pages is this? 3 pages? And is it finished yet? No. Lesson planning takes time, doesn't it? Anything you like about this? Anything pique your interest? Say what? You saw Oreos. It caught your attention, right? You think if you mentioned Oreos at the beginning of the class, and students be like, huh? What? Can we eat these? Maybe at the end. We'll see. We're going to do an experiment with this. Right? Does it look engaging? Are there some good questions that students are being asked? There's some thought about what students might need to know beforehand. Yeah. This is what you're going to be working with. So as I get ready to turn it over to Luke in a few minutes, you're going to start looking at your own folders, at the own lessons and the templates that have been developed already that are still in process. Some have more than others. But this is kind of your starting point. We're giving you more of a starting point this year than we have in the past. In the past, it's been starting from scratch, almost from scratch. Some guidance. We're trying to give a little more guidance this year. So again, like we're talking about tomorrow, you're free to bring your joy, the extra spices you're bringing to the soup that we're making. Right? So in a moment, you're going to be able to go to a specific folder. But I want you to see this one. I think it's a really good example of what it is you're going to be working with, how you're going to fill out the lesson plans that you're making this summer. Any questions? Does this seem fair, reasonable? Excited about teaching? All right, this is important work. All right, you should have a blank sheet of paper in your hands for the exit ticket, which is this. I want to hear from you again. I know I've asked this point a lot, but I'm going to read this later. What's one point that stood out to you the most today? If you could elaborate on that, that would be great. And then, what's one question you have about teaching this summer? Pass these inward and then forward. And I'm going to give snaps to you all for sticking with me for 2.5 hours. I hope that you glean something from it. We're going to spend 90 minutes tomorrow talking about specific teaching techniques you can use when you're lesson planning. And then on Thursday, we're going to talk about teacher moves from the book Teach Like a Champion that will help you in the classroom as well. And we might do some role play and act out some scenarios to do that, all right? So thank you for being patient and sitting through all this morning. And I will get these passed in the middle and passed forward. And Luke, it's all yours.